Good morning. This is Yarrow. Hello from Vancouver. Thanks for listening to my podcast. I really like the feeling of building something. As an entrepreneur yourself, I suspect you do as well. There's something very exciting to see an idea come to life, whether it's a physical product. In my case, it's been entirely digital. And honestly, most of the time, it's just been some version of a website that I've been building. You could call it an app, but it's basically a website that does something. And the feeling of building it and seeing it come to life and then imagining people using it and then basically getting money from those people and making that into a real business is this fuel that excites you, that gets you to keep going. But I've noticed often the building process, there's this enthusiasm and enjoyment, and I guess it ultimately is a form of creativity, much like a writer or a painter or an actor. By building a website, there's a similar energy there where you're in this kind of flow state and you're excited. And I've noticed I've especially been able to experience that at a much more rapid pace thanks to the AI website building tools we've got. In my case, I've been using Replit, but I've got friends using Claude Code and Lovable and Codex. There's so many different ways now you can build an app or a website. And it's very fulfilling. But I've noticed as I assess my maybe even the last two or three things I've been playing with, because the barrier to build has come down, it's so much easier for me to switch to another project that I can start building something one night and then stop and start building something else the next night. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a good thing for actually reaching the point of a successful business. And as I was thinking about even just the few things I've been building in the last, I don't know, 6 to 12 months, I thought back over my previous experiments, especially my failed ones. Or when I say failed, in the true sense, they did fail. They didn't become businesses. But the way I went about building something that I thought, could be a business, certainly the purpose of it was to build something that could function as a business. There was a way to sell something to make money. I was thinking about customers and solving a problem, all the usual things with having a business. I thought back to two, maybe three projects in particular. So during my very early days, there was a period where I was not getting a lot of growth with my actual active money making business. And I was doubting myself a lot. I was very young, early 20s, and I had friends who were doing better with different business models. So I was very loosely attached to my current business and felt very easily I could switch to something else. Now, obviously, this is long before AI. So to build something, even with a basic website editor, to build something good was actually quite challenging. But I had developed a skill set to install basic PHP scripts onto web hosts. So I could basically create simple things like an online forum and other basic software tools. So very simple, nothing too complicated. But for me, an online forum was especially appealing because it was a community. It was instantaneous in the sense that I installed the script. I could then set up some different forums for different purposes, and then anyone can register, make posts, have conversations, even do direct messaging and potentially live chat. So it was easy for my brain to get all excited about, oh, I can start a forum for trading this or for a community about this. So I did start a couple of community sites while I was in this phase of feeling lost and not sure if I was going to get anywhere with my current business. And I remember building those, and there was a sense of excitement. It's kind of like a painter sitting at home painting a painting. No one else is around them. You're just enjoying the creative work. And I really did enjoy that. But obviously, it was this period of, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks where I put this thing together. I bought a domain name for it. I built these forums. And then the reality strikes is no one uses them because there's a whole marketing function required to get something to work. And even for that marketing function to work, you actually have to have something that has some level of product market fit. Like you have to actually give people something they want. And in that case, I was building forums, which are notoriously hard to grow because you've got that chicken and egg start problem. No one posts because no one's posting. Since these weren't my main projects, I often built them, made a few posts myself, sent it to a few friends, and then nothing happened. So that they were very short-lived. But it kind of showed me how much I enjoyed the building process and how easily I could let it go. And it's a weird thing where your energy will be so excited about something and then quickly just disappears. I fast forward a little bit, and I had a project with some friends of mine called Cranky Ads. This was my first attempt at software, and I actually had two co-founders with that, and we were building something that was certainly beyond my own skill set. Hence, I needed, engineering team, and we built something that wasn't what I envisioned. And because I wasn't the builder, it was actually quite frustrating on many levels because I couldn't control the speed of building and I didn't understand why something would be slow or more difficult. It was just simply, I wanted these functions. I couldn't build them myself. I need my engineer to do so. And then we sort of slowly wait for it to happen. Cranky Ads, I won't give you the long story, but the short version is I wanted to create a Facebook-like community focused on advertising. So basically, think of it like Facebook connecting people who own websites with people who want to advertise on websites. And this was long before the dominance of the big advertising platforms. I don't think Facebook even had an ad platform yet, probably just getting started. The only one that was really up and running then was Google Ads. So, it was still more Wild West and there was more independent platforms where you could advertise. I mean, there's probably more now, but they're not as big as the big, the big ones are today. So it was obviously something I could still look at and see as a possible viable business. And I still love the idea. I love the idea of adding a social layer to the transaction between a website owner and an advertiser. And I still think there's some merit there, having like an independent direct connection between those two groups. But honestly, the social layer, probably a bit of a stretch. Why do they want to communicate with each other besides just to make a transaction? So anyway, so that idea turned into something where I learned after, I don't know, we probably spent a year on that. And I learned two things. One, I was not enjoying it nearly as much if I'm not be able to control the building part of it. And two, how much harder it was to build something. So we had maybe half of my ultimate idea built. And that half of the idea as an MVP was like a sort of simple version of some of the basic tools that were out there for advertising management already. So we kind of spent a lot of time, a lot of money to build something that was missing the social layer. It was basically an advertising management tool and one with less features than other advertising management tools out there. So it was an idea that we decided to stop. It wasn't hard to let that one go because I was at that point frustrated by just the inability to build what I wanted. So fast forward again to, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, again before AI, now I've got the ability to pay money. Like I have more money, so I can waste money on ideas, which is honestly very dangerous. And I look back on some of the money I've spent on things and gone, wow, I really, was very, very frivolous with some of this money on things that I probably should have been a little bit more reserved about. But anyway, because I had cash and I had the ability to hire people, especially because I'd recently visited Ukraine and I met people in Ukraine and I had contacts there. I could hire development talent at a reasonable cost. I wouldn't still call it cheap. We're still going to be spending thousands of dollars per month, but I could at least have a team that could build what I wanted in my mind. That was always the goal. I want to be able to build the thing I'm dreaming of. So I started another project called Candid. And this was a bit of a video tool, again, trying to connect two groups of people, basically people who have a skill set and want to promote themselves to be hired. Not like Fiverr, more like a coaching platform. Pick a skill set you have and just do peer-to-peer coaching about it with a sort of social media video, like a TikTok or Reels or socials, that sort of component layered on top. I seem to like to add a social component to a transaction layer for some reason. So we went around building this, and this time I felt a bit more in control. I could certainly get features built, but I still had this issue where I didn't understand the cost or time involved to create something. Like a certain feature I thought would be hard would be easy, and a certain feature that I thought would be easy would take a long time. And then there'd be bugs, and then things would start working, and then more bugs would show up. And I'm like, okay, this is actually a lot harder. And I ended up spending, I think, about $50,000 over a 16-month or 18-month period on the software. And I did have something at the end of it all that could function. But again, I hit this issue where I'm like, okay, I got this tool, but now I have to do marketing and I have to grow this thing. And I've got this, successful agency now, and I've got other things. I'm like, I can't grow two businesses at once, especially when one of them is brand new and really would require a very, very focused marketing team, or myself at least. and money to push it. So I kind of realized, wow, it's a lot harder. Like building is fun, and that's hard as well, and costly. And then when you finish a point where you build, you still have to do something with it to try and get users, which gave me this conclusion that software is a very challenging business model to make work. I've heard this talked about by many other coaches in this space, where you look at software and go, well, you have to put all this money in, and or if you're an engineer, all this time in up front to just create an MVP of an idea that might work. There's not even a simple sort of test. You have to have some kind of MVP concept to see if people will use it. Again, before AI. So, that kind of highlights three experiments. I would call them failed startups, or at least two of them were, proper attempts at businesses. And it was interesting to look back on them and go, look at my energy behind that. While I was building these things, I was all in. My mindset was like, I'm building this. It's fun. I'm enjoying the features. I know people will use this. And I'm going to keep pushing it as hard as I can. I'm going to get users. I'm going to do marketing. I'm going to do, all this promotion. I've got plans. I'll spend some money on advertising, and I'll get users, and this will work. And you kind of have to be like that, because otherwise, why start the project, right? Yeah, sure, it could be a hobby and a side hustle, but then why build something if no one's going to use it? Ultimately, there has to be some sort of feedback mechanism, I believe, at least as an entrepreneur, to enjoy the building process as well. So now fast forward to like the last 6 months, where we've got Replit and Lovable and Codex and Claude Code and so on. And the idea to MVP is a lot easier and can be done by one non-technical person. I mean, I can basically sit there and build something and get pretty close. And even if I can't quite get it working right, I have a few friends who I can tap on to, finish the little technical parts that I'm struggling with. And it's been interesting because I've done the same thing in the last sort of 6 months, where I've, I always had my core business, but I've been able to pump out these things very fast. And it's exciting to build them. It's exciting to see them appear in one night of vibe coding. Of course, the same problem is, okay, we got to get users. We have to, have a marketing plan here. And that's always the hardest part. And I think this is probably there's two elements of a lesson that I've gained from this. And I already knew them, but this has really cemented them for me in my psyche, which is changing the way I choose to do things now and going forward. The two things are, one, the marketing part of this is such a big part of making a business, and you really underestimate that as a builder. It's like we have this dream that you're going to build something and press play or press start. The web will be there, the app will be there, and people will just use it, love it, and then tell everyone else, and it'll grow like crazy. That is the unicorn outcome. It is very unlikely for that to happen for most new business ideas, because a lot of business ideas aren't that new, or they hit on needs that aren't that strong, or you simply just aren't good at marketing, so you don't know how to get people's attention onto your idea. So there's a bit of a false hope that you're just going to have a miracle outcome. But we all have to believe in that as an entrepreneur, because we all want to experience that. And that's the only story we hear on Twitter, on X, on media. It's this amazing growth start. These companies that are 100 million a year within 6 months, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I just need to get 2 million a year within 6 months, and I'd be happy. But the reality is, getting 2 customers is actually quite a challenge, let alone 2 million or 100 million. So that reality is hit home, I think, and that's why committing to a project means committing to a marketing function. So you really have to consider that. How are you going to sell? And you have to do that thinking that word of mouth may not work. You may have to push this boulder up the hill before you get any momentum. And maybe it'll start rolling down the other side of the hill once you do get some traction. Maybe. The other thing I've learned about myself is how fickle my motivation can be with building. And I think what's happened is, because I can use these tools, my life cycle of idea to application is so much shorter that I don't spend months caught in the potential of the idea, because I have it. I press I press some sentences. I do some prompts. I write some prompts and I modify a little bit, and I spend maybe 3 hours in one night and have this working app, or close to working. And then I'm like, oh, same story. I have to promote this. Is this the thing I want to promote? What about the thing I built last week? And suddenly you're realizing that you're like this mad tinkerer or this inventor who can invent things, and they finish the invention and look at it and go, I'm proud of this. I love it. I love what I built. I love clicking on the buttons and setting things up and using it. But I'm like, oh, I don't like, it's so easy to do that. And I hit the marketing function and go, I'm not sure if I want this to be the thing I spend all my time promoting now. So it's made me realize that the building process is a form of creativity that feels good as a human being. It is flow state. It is exciting, especially as an entrepreneur. We love the potential of a new idea. So in one way, the blessing of these vibe coding tools has been able to realize this faster. So you come to the conclusion faster of, is this actually something you want to spend your time on? Because suddenly 1 week of coding is all you need, or vibe coding, where in the past they might have been 6 to 12 months of hiring a technical team or getting a co-founder, or maybe building something yourself if you're somewhat engineering coding it capable, and that's a much longer time frame, and it's a lot more sunk cost, which might be a good thing because it means you would spend more time marketing because you have committed 6 to 12 months. But I know from my experience that's not always the case, and often I will just stick to the thing that's working already. Like, I should say, the whole time I did all these things that I've been talking about, there's always been one thing I have already that is making me money. It's always been this, need to find another thing on the side, or hopefully it becomes the main thing. So every time I've been building, whether it was Cranky Ads or Candid, or back in the early days of my forums, there was always an agency or my coaching education business or something that I was making actual money from, that I went back to because I was like, oh, this is A, easier. B, I know we've got customers. C, I have a clear path on how to market this. So I go back to that, because if I don't have that, then I have to, I guess, follow through on the thing that I'm building. And that's a different story. And that's why I think the burn the bridges concept is actually important, or it is critical to exit one project fully before starting another. I think that's definitely the case for me. In terms of energy, there will always be the thing. I know that's the thing, and I've got to focus on that every day on some shape or form. But then there's the other things I might play with at night. And maybe one day when I exit the thing, or I sell it, or I shut it down, or I stop doing that thing, then one of these new side projects will become the thing. And then I'll have the energy and the motivation and the commitment to really follow through with it. I know some people are different. Some people, you might build entire teams to run projects, and you've got the capacity and the resources to do that, so you can sit on top of them and run multiple things. I could see that now. I could potentially have a business like my agency, and I could have 2 or 3 of them if I had teams, because I'm more of a decision maker, leader type role. I'm not a day-to-day activity type role. But when I'm building something new, I tend to get more in the weeds, and I have to do more of the day-to-day, which requires more energy. So obviously you can't have multiple startups like that, because they're all going to suffer if you're spreading energy across multiple ones. You really can only have multiple businesses if there really are teams that run these businesses, or some form of systems. Anyway, all that to say, it's been an interesting experience for me to see what the feeling is like when you can build something really fast. And it's been eye-opening, because it's made me go, okay, I have to really see a future in a business that's more than just I'm excited about the idea in the moment. I have to see myself pushing it and promoting it for months and years. And that's a big commitment. It is like deciding to enter a relationship. So you have to be clear what you're building. Just because you can vibe code it doesn't mean it's going to succeed. You need to have an entire plan and marketing, or at least a commitment to do something with your marketing long term. Okay, I'll leave it there. My name is Yaro. I'm not sure if you found any of that helpful. If you're an entrepreneur, I'm sure you have some similar thoughts and feelings and experiences like I just talked about, and maybe you're vibe coding right now. So there's a bit of a reminder there that, just because you build doesn't mean it will work. So be prepared for that reality when you have your vibe coded tool, that there's going to be a marketing need there. And that's when all the things I talk about with the rest of my podcasts and content, it's all about building an audience, brand building, content marketing, getting those search results, paid advertising, everything to get the word of mouth out there. That is where honestly more of the work is. So I've been in marketing most of my life, and I've come to realize that is perhaps the underappreciated function of entrepreneurship, because we tend to hear the stories of the entrepreneurs who just build something amazing and it works, and you don't realize all the marketing that's going on behind the scenes to make it work. My name is Yaro. Thanks for listening. This is the Yaro Podcast. You can find me on all the podcast apps. Just search for my name, Yaro, Yaro. Bye-bye.